Are you a dog behavior geek like me? Join me for my absolute favorite weekend of the year, the 2025 Dog Behavior Conference. If you've attended before, you know how special the DBC is. And if you've never joined us for this amazing 3-day online event, it's truly a one-of-a-kind gathering of like-minded dog geeks, pet pros, trainers, and animal advocates from all over the world. Registration is now open at dogbehaviorconference.com, and the virtual live conference takes place on April the 4th to the 6th. So, reserve your spot today at dogbehaviorconference.com. That's dogbehaviorconference.com. I'll see you there. Whenever anybody talks about adolescence in humans and in dogs, people who have had teenagers raise their eyes to heaven. They're like, oh my gosh. People who've had adolescent dogs do the same. And unfortunately, the very sad side of that is that adolescence sometimes really makes people's lives very hard, as well as dogs' lives very hard. And that's why so many adolescent dogs end up in the shelter. But my next guest, the fabulous Sarah Fisher, is here. She will be speaking about Acing Adolescence at the Dog Behavior Conference, April the 4th to the 6th. But she is here to give us a little taster. Sarah, I am so glad. She's from Animal Centered Education. She's the founder and she's a behavior counselor. She's on VSA faculty. We love her. She comes back every year to speak at the conference. I'm so glad you can be here on the podcast, Sarah.
Hi, Vicky. Thank you so much. I'm super excited because I love connecting with you. We've known each other a long time. Dog Behavior Conference is the highlight of my working year, and adolescence is my absolute all-time favorite age group. So today can't actually get that much better for me.
Well, I'm really glad because there's a lot of people that probably don't share your love for the adolescent dog. And I love the fact that you do. I love the fact that adolescence is your favorite age group because, when anybody really talks about it, it is with, oh my gosh, this is just a really hard period of time. And it is. Look, I mean, you and I have both had both. The teenagers can be difficult to deal with, certainly. And also dogs can be really hard to deal with. But when we truly understand that adolescent dog, you kind of see it. If you reframe and see that adolescence is actually a time of really unbelievable and amazing growth, then maybe that can take us through what can be a lot of challenges that come our way. So can you talk about your approach to adolescence, and have you always thought like this?
The fact that you're right, that it's like such an amazing period of growth, but we also need to recognize it's not just growth for the dog, it's growth for us. It's growth for us as a canine caregiver, it's growth for us as a canine educator, and it's actually growth for us as a species, because we need to be more empathetic and we need to connect more. And we also need, I think, as canine educators, to step back and not rush in and say, oh, there's a deficit here in this adolescent dog's learning. I get to fill that in, and oh, I can support them here. And when I switched from having that excitement and joy about what I was going to be able to do to support adolescent dogs that were coming to me on foster to help them get ready to not just find a home, but hopefully stay in that home, and I switched to say, hang on a minute, I need to stop and consider what I can learn from these adolescent dogs. The whole way I connect with dogs changed. And I was already exploring lots of different ways of helping support dogs of all ages and backgrounds, particularly in rescue. But the foster puppies I had that came to me around 5 months of age and stayed through adolescence, and some stayed permanently, have taught me the most. And I have rethought so many aspects of what is shared when it comes to adolescent education that has been truly life changing and life saving, not just for the dogs, but for their caregivers too.
And when you say life changing and life saving, can you expand upon that?
I always get emotional, as you know. I wear my heart on my sleeve. And somebody sent me a little write up on adolescence and how ACE helped them navigate that. Because we're just putting some bits together, some resources together for, ACE for puppies, ACE for adolescent dogs. And this is a dog who's been in some of the presentations for the Dog Behaviour Conference, Jonty, young Rhodesian Ridgeback, who's now, I think, coming up 4, maybe he's a bit older. And adolescence was really tough for Jonty, but it was really, really tough for his caregivers too. And one of the things they highlighted in what they wrote for me said that when I said, if you're struggling through adolescence, it means your dog is struggling. They said that was one of the most powerful sentences they could have read, most powerful words they could have heard. And it really helped them rethink how their dog was navigating his world. Interestingly, and I shared the puppy video at last year's Dog Behaviour Conference because I was talking about movement, because I'm looking at the whole dog. I'm not just trying to compartmentalize and think about what a dog might need to learn at specific times of their life. I'm thinking about supporting that whole dog from as early an opportunity as possible. And when I got sent a video of Jonty as a puppy before he joined Matt and Tam from Southwest Dog Skills here in the UK, his movement was extraordinary. He couldn't turn, if I remember, in maybe to the left, maybe both directions. He'd sort of do this weird reversing when he needed to navigate space, whereas his litter mates were exploring and moving in what you would consider to be a normal motor pattern. And Jonty couldn't. He had this very odd way of changing direction. And there's studies that are going on now with human babies where researchers are collecting data on the movement of the newborn baby and the developing, baby and up to maybe, I don't know, walking age, I'm not sure. And they're looking to see if they can actually start identifying changes in those movement patterns that might actually link to developmental delays that can affect learning and behaviour that might not be so obvious until the child's a little bit older, because the earlier they can identify struggles, obviously the earlier they can offer the right support to help that child navigate the world. And it would be amazing to start charting this with puppies, especially seeing that video of Jonty as a puppy. And when he was coming into adolescence, the whole world was overwhelming. So similar to some of my foster puppies and my own companion, Henry, and my other companion, Cookie Doe, is no longer with me, but they're the 2 dogs I credit ACE with, and certainly the development of ACE Free work with. Jonty's response to anything that was disruptive, which could be hand contact, sound in the environment, something moving in the environment, he would mouth at his caregiver's feet, jump up, hump, mouth. And they're beautifully honest about their struggles when they write about Jonty. And they said it got so bad, the thought went through their mind when they were out that they would just drop the lead and walk away.
Wow.
And they would, of course, never have done that. But I think these are really important conversations to have. And I think we as an industry need to do more to find ways to support and understand the adolescent dog. And sometimes that may be looking outside the industry, looking at child development, the development of the baby. And that's where I changed the way I connect with dogs. Instead of going, oh, I get to fill in all these gaps and teach all these valuable life skills, I went, hang on a minute, we need to help with supporting the development of the entire glorious adolescent dog. And are the behaviors that we see in adolescence really new? Or are they linked to something we missed in puppyhood, or we inadvertently taught in puppyhood? And why are we always looking at the puppy and the adolescent dog and not actually looking at how our behavior might be banked by that puppy's nervous system in terms of speed of walking around our own property, teaching the puppy to run all the time to keep up with us?
I want to talk to you about that. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, carry on. Sorry.
And is mouthing in puppyhood and adolescence part of their learning? Yes, in all probability. But might it actually also be to do with struggles and needing to bite to try and help calm the brain? Because we know from the human world, that adults that are struggling and small children and young babies that are struggling with sensory overload will bite. And we need to have this discussion around the sensory side of the bite. Plus, I think we also need to talk about comfort eating. And what are we creating in that amazing developing brain when it comes to reward-based training, albeit by mistake? Are we creating connections that are changing the way that dog perceives food from a really early age? The answer is I don't know. But what I do know is that Henry absolutely, I would class as comfort eats. And are we mistaking this as well for a dog's desire to learn and trying to accelerate learning through reward-based training at a time when we actually need to stand back, watch more, and do less, to allow all these amazing connections to develop and strengthen at a pace that suits each individual dog, with support from us, but less influence from us, if that makes sense.
Everybody who's listening right now, their heads are exploding. I can tell you, they're like, what? A lot of people listen to the podcast when they're taking their dog for a walk, or, they're driving in the car. You're going to have people going, huh? So there's a lot to explore here. There's what first of all just triggered me in a good way was when you're talking about, well, first of all, the whole movement stuff. But when you're talking about walking, and how when we're walking with a young puppy, the young puppy is basically learning to trot next to us. And so then
or gamble,
right.
Yeah.
And then when they get older, doesn't that influence the way they walk and therefore pull on the lead when they get older?
Yes, there has to be an influence from those early learned movement patterns on the adolescent dog and the adult dog too. And then compounded with whatever their sensory systems are banking, because think of sensation as the causation for movement. So what are they learning? What are they feeling in terms of movement and their environment and our behavior and our habits? Think about then what else is going on for the adolescent dogs in terms of rapid development of their frame, their brain, their long bones of their hind legs are growing often much more quickly than the long bones in the front legs. So they're tipping out of balance. Every cell in their body is telling them to explore their environment and extend that social circle. They're sensitive because there's so much going on during these sensitive periods in terms of development, that there's an emotional component to pulling that we don't often discuss either. It all comes back to lack of training, and that's just not true. It's linked to poor emotional balance, poor physical balance. Adolescence is painful. Plus, when you watch young adolescent dogs, engaging and learning from other dogs in their environment, they mirror, and they mirror by coming up really quite close to these dogs and mirroring that movement, and all the glorious mirror neurons are activated. And that made me really looking at pictures and videos and watching my own adolescent educators, because they really are my educators. I'm not theirs. They really are mine. Made me also question this, oh, your adolescent dog will forget everything. Well, the brain's very busy doing other stuff, and they're also looking for more experiences. But surely we have to question, did that puppy really learn what we thought we were teaching them? Because if we can recognize that mirroring is really an important part of development for puppies sort of around that 4-5 month age, up to 6 months, maybe beyond, we've got to look at a huge range of different breed types and sizes, haven't we, to start to really identify these patterns. Were we really teaching the puppy to walk next to us with our lovely cues and our lovely treats, or are they just mirroring us, keeping close and mirroring our movement? And did we then take that for granted, that we managed to successfully teach them to walk in balance by our side, but they never actually learnt it from us? We just happened to capture a natural part of development. Am I making sense?
Yes, you are.
And therefore, we maybe weren't quite as clear with cues, quite as predictable, quite as focused on really supporting that learning experience. We just thought, oh my goodness, the puppy's amazing, I'm amazing. And because it wasn't necessarily a learned behavior that had been reinforced, it was just a part of development. As that development continues and the puppy no longer needs to mirror the movement in quite the same way, because they don't, that's when they look like they're no longer listening to what we're inviting them to do. But they never banked that information. It was just a natural, an intrinsic need to copy us and copy our movement and copy the movement of others around them. And I think as well, we've got to be really careful. We know about the critical periods, sensitive periods, but it's the quality of every experience, not the quantity, that matters. And what you don't want your youngster doing is learning how to protect themselves, how to move quickly to navigate space that they don't feel safe in. We really want to look at all the quality of all those learning experiences and not necessarily keep accelerating their learning at a time when they're so vulnerable, maybe shrinking, that world, but still carrying on, giving them really important experiences, because that is a really important part of development, but in the safety of their home or a more familiar environment. And really thinking about the quality of what we see. What can we bring to them? What can we learn from them?
It's just, it makes so much sense.
Right? Adolescent dogs are brilliant, because we should be questioning everything and focusing on what we see as opposed to what we believe is actually happening. And I remember you asking me a long, long time ago, when DBC was here in the UK in person, to do a presentation on the adolescent dogs. And I said, of course, my favourite age group. And I am talking a long time ago. There are better resources out there for people to access knowledge. And I remember having a quick look around the internet, as you do. Where are we at? What are the public able to access? What's the common thinking at the moment? And I went to several websites, and some people were saying, accelerate training. Like, oh, well, okay, but we actually need to keep them feeling safe, and we absolutely need to make sure that they keep building this amazing sensory reference library, as I call it, that they need to feel safe. So, okay, that's really interesting. A lot of messaging is keep training, do more. And what I discovered was, when the adolescent dogs are struggling, don't do more, do something different. That was what I was sharing at that conference. And also said another website where people would go, and I'm not going to throw anyone under the bus, people would go to find information on puppies and puppy education and breed types and how to live, with your animal companion and what you need to do to ensure they have good health and good welfare and their emotional needs are met. And there was a load of information on puppyhood, loads of information on adult dogs and caring for senior dogs. And then the adolescent section can be a challenging phase. Don't worry, soon passes. And I was like, what?
Oh,
the probably the most critical time in a dog's life goes on for 2.5 years, and many dogs and caregivers struggle, and all we've got is 2 sentences basically saying, oh yeah, it can be a nightmare, but don't worry, it'll pass. Okay. And that inspired me to share more and more of my own experiences with adolescents, and obviously shared a lot of that information then. So I'm super happy to be revisiting it. We have talked about it before on DBC, but I just love this constant questioning of some beliefs that are out there, which might be right, but maybe we need to look at them in a little bit more detail. Because so many of the adolescent dogs I've supported have had undiagnosed pain, and just being able to support them by providing them with lots of sensory input that gives them control, helps to strengthen the whole musculoskeletal system, has been hugely beneficial for the adolescent dogs that I've had the pleasure to connect with. And I've just been there to support them and let them learn from their environment in a safe way, and looking at how long they actually want to engage from a sensory point of view. And actually this applies to dogs of all ages, and it's actually around 17 minutes. And that's been mind-blowing to watch dogs in ACE-free work, which I'll also be talking about, really looking at these amazing patterns that have always been there, but we just haven't recognized them before. And thinking how many youngsters are, inadvertently overwhelmed when they're taken out as part of their habituation and socialization. And if we recognize that exploration and that engagement with all these amazing sensory experiences is 17 minutes, and we actually see this in other contexts, and we see it in the human world as well, it would be so interesting to get a little poll, and maybe people can share this at the DBC, of if they support adolescent dogs or are currently living with an adolescent dog, when do the adolescent dogs put the brakes on when they're out? Because I don't know an adolescent dog that hasn't put the brakes on. And they're called stubborn and testing boundaries.
Yes.
But for me, they're actually overwhelmed. And when the computer starts doing that wheel of death, I kind of picture that going on in the brain, where the brain is being bombarded with so much information that the dog just needs to stop and process all of that information. Is it also pain related? Is it the sensation of pain? But have we walked beyond their capacity to actually take on board and process all those experiences? Because if you think about it, 17 minutes isn't very long. And if people are trying to tire out an adolescent dog or work through a checklist, and it should never be a checklist for education, have they gone past the point of cognitive, emotional, and physical comfort, and the dog's literally just shut down? Because that's what I see is happening.
Where when you think about it, people are like, oh, I'm going to take my dog out for a walk, a good hour walk a day.
Yeah.
That's it. And it's not a one size fits all at all.
No.
It's almost like having a senior dog as I have now, and her telling me how long she wants to walk or not.
Yeah.
It's her giving her that freedom, that choice to say, now we're done. Right now, she's at 5 minutes.
Interesting.
She's at 5 minutes.
And great that you hear her.
I do.
Great that
I
you
take
hear
her
her.
out. She loves to go and do her little sniffies. She does her business. Then she looks towards the house and says, I'm done.
I'm done.
We
Perfect.
go back. It's 5 minutes. And there's me like, well, you know, she's 14 and a half. And I'm not going to take her for an hour there's no stamina building here. If she just wants 5 minutes, that's what she'll get. Listen to
Love
your
that.
dog. Listen
Yes.
to your dog. So okay. Can I go back just to puppyhood and ask you this question that we have been talking about a lot at Positively as well, and with the whole potty training and creating puppies in order to potty train them. So I don't know whether it was you, but somebody has put me on the path. I know some members of my team as well, but I think it was you that sort of made me see the light about why are we confining puppies in crates when it's such an important time for movement?
Yeah. It
And
was me.
actually, it's okay. Yeah, no, I think it
At
was.
DBC last year. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So
And
then
in
it was you, the
conversations that
DBC
you and
last.
I have had. Yeah.
No. Well, then that's good because why are we doing that? And isn't it unkind in a way to force our dogs to hold it, and put them in a crate so they can't A, move, and B, they're having to hold it for however long we deem that they should be holding it, because if they're 3 months old, well, it's an hour for every month, isn't it? Or 4 months or 5 months. Okay, let's have this 5-month-old pup hold it for 5 hours in a crate. Okay, you should not be crating your dog for that long. But the whole idea of crates, well, I have gone. I'm not anti-crate. Please, people, I'm not anti-crate, but I am a crate with the door open. And I do feel like dogs do need to have a little bit of experience of being in a closed crate,
Yeah.
in case you are driving and you need a crate, or in case they're at the vet or something like that. So it's not just such a panic. But can you elaborate on that, Sarah? Because it was such an awakening for me to go, what are we doing with these puppies?
Every being needs to move to develop skills that will help them thrive and survive, which includes learning. And there is so much research that shows that humans learn more quickly when they are moving around an environment and engaging with, balancing exercises and things like that. And if you think about movement being fundamental to life, it kind of helps you understand why movement is so important at all life stages. Because without movement, we're dead. Because that includes involuntary movement and movement of organs like our heart and the peristalsis in the gut. But it also obviously involves voluntary movement. And I think it's in Japan, researchers have shown that spontaneous movement in the womb enables the peripheral and central nervous system to develop, and spontaneous movement in the newborn helps to develop the sensory motor system. And that made me think about what we see as spontaneous movement in the adolescent dogs, that many people will call lack of impulse control.
Oh my God.
Because if you then think about adult humans, dogs, adult horses, we see less spontaneous play and less spontaneous sudden bursts of energy. Watch lambs, they'll be doing this spontaneous movement, but you don't see the adult sheep doing it. So I'm sure it's a crucial part of developing the sensory motor system and also developing bone and strengthening really important structures, and including a way of moving the body to hunt, but also play to strengthen social connections as well. Movement is such an integral part of life. And there's also proof that if you have an open-ended movement, you're not teaching a beginning and an end to a movement. That's more beneficial for, I think, developing the nervous system or something. So I think about that as well. Why are we teaching kind of not static positions. Nothing's ever static. There's always movement. But why are we teaching dogs to hold postures that might not be so easy for them when they're tipping out of balance? And also, everything's changing at such a rapid rate. So look at what movements are your dogs offering. So Henry found sit difficult because he needed to move a lot. He needed to move to navigate all the sensations internally because he has hip dysplasia and a bit sensitive around the knees and issue on the right side of his neck. And that was the same for Cookie Dough and some of the other puppies I fostered. They needed to move to navigate their environment. I've never had a problem house training a puppy. And I got my first puppy when I was 11. And I've never used a crate for house training. Not ever. And the puppies that really needed to move more, like Cookie Dough and Henry, I did teach them that being in a crate was okay, because like you say, for being in a vet's, or if they had to be on crate rest or traveling in a car safely, I do think it's an important life skill. I really do, to feel safe being contained. I actually never used crates other than as a learning experience. If they needed downtime because they need to sleep a lot, for that deep sleep, deep rest, really important part of development as well, I used a pen or just had a quiet, safe room for them. I'm lucky I could create a safe room. Yep. But in places where I couldn't, we had a pen. So they could still move more than if they were in a crate. And so many crates are too small. They don't allow the puppy or the adolescent dog to really stretch out, to lie on their back, to organize their body in the array of sleeping postures that you actually observe in a dog that's free to choose when and how they organize their body in sleep and where they like to sleep. Because most dogs during the day as well will change where they're resting, less so at night, but the crate doesn't give them any options. And part of the development as well, if you give a youngster a new chew maybe, there might be a lot of play, flinging and rolling on that chew, and lots of reorganization of the body and gnawing and then going back to playing and parading it. So people sometimes will give the dog a chew when they're in the crate, or the youngster, to give them something to do in that crate, but they're removing a lot of the spontaneous movement that dog might engage with that chew item. And we're inhibiting so much movement in our youngsters for a variety of reasons and in a variety of ways. Again, even by mistake, we have to consider what could be the potential fallout on the developing sensory motor system. And when I had 2 foster puppies that I brought down from Battersea, and I'll talk about them in the conference, I'm sure, I just gave them freedom to move. And they were actually great. They could self-soothe and self-settle. So I didn't need to create designated rest sleep time that I actually did need to introduce for Cookie Dough and Henry. They were able to just take themselves off and sleep quietly on their own without that additional support from me. I didn't curb their movement at all. Nature's not stupid. And you need movement to create bone density and to strengthen muscle. But I didn't make them move. I didn't have them on a lead and march them for long periods around the farm, going through a little habituation, socialization checklist. They just explored. They had different heights to climb over that was safe. They had different sensory items to engage with, because I was already starting that before Cookie Dough joined me in 2008. And when we went back to the shelter so they could have their second jabs and their microchips, they were bigger, they had more bone, more muscle, they were emotionally more mature than their 6 siblings who'd stayed in the shelter, very progressive shelter, lots of amazing knowledge, would have given them lots of good experiences, but not quite in the same way that I did at Tilly Farm, just because of lack of time and resources. Not only were my puppies bigger and more mature, they were more robust in terms of exposure to novel experiences. And we'd never practiced jabs, but what I had done was move their skin. I roll the skin on puppies and dogs' necks and just gentle lifting of the skin in preparation for injections, work all over their body, moving the skin. And I actually want to feel the mobility on a youngster's skin, because lots of youngsters that seem confident when they're young actually have really tight skin. So they actually move a lot. It's not that they're super curious and want to explore. It's more that they can't relax, Vicky. And those confident puppies can become really anxious adult dogs. So my puppies were popped up on the vet's table, handled by unfamiliar people, microchip injections, didn't move. They weren't on a queue. They were just really calm, sitting, watching this experience, greeting the people, really calm as they were being handled, not phased at all. And their 6 siblings were, I'm on the table and handle, I don't know you, a bit wriggly and all of that. I hadn't taught any of those specific skills to the puppies. I had just given them, hopefully, a full enriched experience, allowing them to move and really strengthening every glorious part of them. We're making a mistake when we think all teaching comes from us.
Yes. I always have a picture in my mind of a dog, a free roaming dog that I saw in Greece, who was just standing there looking so regal, surveying everything that was going on. And there were some other dogs just hanging out around this male dog. And I thought, you're so wise. That was the word that came to me when I looked at him. You are so wise. He doesn't need people. I mean, people feed him, but he doesn't need people. And I thought that was a huge game changer for me as well. Like, our dogs, obviously, they're our companions, but I think we're dumbing them down a bit.
I agree. I totally agree.
And it's something I want to explore. I have to take a quick break, but after the break, I do want to discuss this relationship that we have with our dogs where, as you said, it's not us teaching them. I mean, we can teach them skills. It's our world, and we're not saying don't teach them skills, but the kind of skills you're teaching them and the approach that you have to that, I think, has to be looked at. Okay, we'll be back after this short break. Are you and your dog struggling with reactivity? You're not alone. The good news is that we've created a completely new approach to managing your dog's reactivity, and it's available for you and your dog right now. Go to positively.com, click Take a Course, and choose Help Stop Reactivity to enroll in this game-changing online course for you and your dog today. That's positively.com. I'm back with Sarah Fisher. She is acing adolescence. In fact, that's what she'll be speaking about at the Dog Behavior Conference, April the 4th to the 6th. Okay, this dog I was telling you about that I saw in Greece, and I just looked at him and I said, you are so wise. And I thought, how can we as guardians be guardians, understand the wisdom of our dogs, give our dogs opportunities to grow that wisdom without us interfering too much? How do we get that balance? So it sort of led me down that path of trying to do less. I know I've said this on the podcast before, but I had a drama teacher at drama school who said to me, well, he was actually at university when I was studying performing arts at university, and his name was John Wright, and he was physical theatre, mask work, clowning, all of that. I wasn't very good at it. I really wasn't very good at clowning, but something that I really said stuck with me. He said, do less, and that was because, people do too much. Yeah. Certainly. I mean, you're you've got a family of actors. You know the difference between Amdram and the real professional actors. Yeah. They're reacting rather than acting. I mean, the whole thing, because amateurs tend to do too much. But he said, do less and just be. That was the
Yep.
best piece of advice I got.
Perfect.
So how can we be everything we need, not just for adolescent dogs, but for all our dogs, whatever life stages they're in? How can we celebrate their wisdom without interfering too much in that development? Am I making sense?
Yes.
I hope I am.
I love this conversation, and I love your thinking, and that what your drama teacher shared with you is so relevant. And we don't allow our dogs to share their wisdom. We kind of, and we as a species, we
Yes.
do. People that are
Yeah.
listening will be doing that
Yeah.
already.
Yeah.
We as a species tend not to. We tend to feel that all learning has to come from us, and we misinterpret behavior, and we miss behavior as well. And we're not necessarily so focused on just being with our companions and spending time with them and learning from them and enjoying that shared experience together without us being task focused or goal oriented. When I was a child, I used to steal every dog that I could get my hands on in the neighborhood and go roaming for hours and hours and hours with all different types of dogs, but particularly a border collie called Duffy. And I just loved the freedom. I didn't have treats. Reward-based training wasn't a thing. We didn't have toys. We just explored together. And when I was on holiday in Portugal as a child, my parents, I don't even know how they found this tiny little fishing village that now I'm sure it's overdeveloped. And there were free roaming dogs, community dogs, well fed, well looked after. And while my parents and my sister were sunbathing on the beach, I would be exploring the rock pools with whichever community dog had adopted me. And again, I didn't have treats. As a child, reward-based training wasn't accessible. And I didn't have dog toys. I hadn't gone with the expectation of buddying up with a dog for the 2 weeks that we were there. But to my delight, I did. And I just remember these dogs being with me as I was exploring rock. I love rock pools. The life that's in a rock pool, amazing. And splashing through the shallow waves with me and going up the dusty tracks and stuff. And it was just the joy of being together. And I'm sure those early experiences have shaped ACE free work. And that really is a celebration of learning from our companions, really looking at how they organize their body. What movement patterns have we reinforced or created that might actually not be so beneficial, might not be so efficient for our animals? Why are we teaching dogs to only walk on one side of our body and, maybe maintain a position where they're looking up at us? What happens when we start to teach a dog to stare at a target, for example, whether it's us, or maintain a position where we've got a nose touch and we're asking a dog to maintain that? Look at the quality of what's going on in that dog's posture, because I want movement. I don't mean it's not appropriate to teach still positions for things like vet checks and blood draws. Of course it is. It can be hugely beneficial. But what we want is the dog to be a participant in that and to be able to say, I'm struggling. And when we ask for static positions, quite often actually what we're doing is their eyes are getting wider, the dog stops blinking, they're getting tenser in the body, they're tucking up their abdomen as they're breath holding, the ribs aren't moving so much anymore, they're almost in freeze. And maintaining that eye contact on something without blinking can trigger parts of the brain to become hyperactive in a bid to try and maintain focus. So again, what are we doing in teaching some of this to our dogs without actually fully embracing what is going to be more beneficial for these incredible beings that give more to us than we could ever hope to give to them? And allowing them to be part of that conversation and listening to what they have to say, and recognizing that when an adolescent dog becomes touch sensitive, it's nearly always bang on that 5-month mark. It's not because they're becoming dominant and testing us and trying to rule the world. It's because there are biological processes, I'm sure, that are telling them They need to move beyond the comfort of contact, because if comfort was giving that adolescent dog everything they needed, as it did when they were a puppy and they were snugged up with their siblings and their mum, the adolescent dog would never need to go off and expand their world. And it's the same for adolescent humans. It's nothing to do with peer pressure. It's to do with all those adolescent humans starting to get conflict around body contact, because actually every cell in their body is saying you kind of need to start exploring getting rewards in other ways. Because if all you ever want to do is be hugged by your mum, that species is going to be extinct pretty quickly.
Yeah, you're not going to survive.
No, you're not.
That is not a good survival strategy.
No. So it makes sense that touch becomes aversive to adolescent beings to a degree. And we need to listen to this, and we need to look and say, well, how can I help you? Because actually body contact's really important for vet checks, for me to check how painful you might be during sudden growth spurts. I'm a big fan of temporary pain relief during adolescence. You can get inflammation of the bone in the dogs with, bigger breeds with more bone. Most dogs I know become touch sensitive, particularly around the hip joint at 5 months of age. And interestingly, in human babies, when their teeth are coming in, the saliva gets more acidic. That has to be happening in puppies and adolescent dogs as well. That their internal environment is changing through the simple act of all those teeth changing, which is in itself painful. And then what's that acidic environment doing maybe to the gut? Lots of adolescent dogs get acid reflux, and you see massive behavior change after they've eaten, sometimes very specific foods, or after they've eaten a meal. Lots of belching, backing away, and then maybe hard mouthing, going back to that sensory side of the bite. Or they'll pick up a very specific toy. And I also think teaching trades and swaps is too early for lots of dogs. That we need to give, and take the pressure off and learn about our dog's preferences, decompressors, and learning styles.
Sarah, this is obviously it's groundbreaking stuff. It shouldn't be groundbreaking stuff, really, should it?
But it's not really, is it, though?
No, but it's not.
It's groundbreaking to have a conversation like this.
It is.
What I'm saying is resonating with you because actually it makes sense.
Yes, it does.
And you will have observed all of this, but maybe we just haven't thought about it and I won't be the only one thinking like this, guaranteed. Because when we're all actually starting to really learn from our companions, we're going to see the same things.
Yeah.
But it needs to be, we need to give people permission to say, I've seen this as well. That fits with my ethos. I've been thinking the same. And that's where the DBC and what you do for the dog world, Victoria, is so powerful. You bring all those voices together.
We try and explore this. I mean, obviously it's for the good of dogs and for the good of the people that love their animals, whether their animals are just companions or, that they are working with them. But it's training seems to, and our industry of training, train, seems to be interfering with just us just being.
Yeah.
And I always cite my grandmother, always with her beagles 40 years ago. She wasn't teaching them with treats. She wasn't training them to really do anything at all. They just were. They had a great relationship. They listened to her. They were very much allowed to be dogs. And of course she had the luxury of countryside and space. And
yes, that's also something we have to factor in is the environment. But we can create a more peaceful environment in our home by giving them the opportunity to move, explore, and expand that sensory reference library. Sorry, I cut you off.
No. Well, what I do want to explore is, and I know you're going to go more into this during your presentation, but you have adolescence, and it's not just the sort of the mouthing that we kind of expect when pups are teething, but it becomes more intense. This mouthing. It's, I hear it so much from people that, and seen it so much in my work, of adolescent dogs really now using their mouth, and using their mouth in a harder way. And it's not just because that mouthing was reinforced when they were a puppy, and that mouthing started when they were a puppy and now has just continued. I don't feel like maybe sometimes that is, but I feel like a lot of the dogs that I see, the mouthing just starts in adolescence, like that mouthing. You know what I mean by that mouthing?
I've worn bite sleeves for adolescent dogs.
Yeah.
I've been bruised. I remember doing a live show in the summer here in the UK for the BBC at the same time that I was fostering Cookie Dough Dynamo, the dog that really changed what I do and how I connect with dogs the most. Not because she was trying to repulse me and stop me from doing stuff, but because she was overwhelmed. And I was black and blue, but I had to wear long sleeves for filming in this hot studio in the summer because I was just covered with bruises from that really hard mouthing. And in my experience, it's a dog that's overwhelmed. It's a dog that's trying to find relief, as Andy Hale would say. They're trying to find comfort. They're trying to regulate a overwhelming input of sensory information, and or they're painful. And that comes back to that acid reflux. It comes back to growing pains. It comes back to sensitivity to touch. That all the senses are heightened during these really important developmental sensitive periods. And our world is a busy world. Sleep deprivation, the wrong type of diet, where they could be sensitive, not allergic to some common foodstuffs like chicken. Henry had acid reflux. He couldn't eat chicken or rice. Goes along with dogs being destructive, but is some of that destruction, again, trying to get that sensory relief? Or is it pica? Are they trying to eat non-food items because they've got gut pain? And also, are the games people playing reinforcing some of this anxiety in these adolescent dogs, which is triggering that mouthing as a way of not trying to punish the human or hurt the human, but just as a way of being overwhelmed? And so many young children do it. And parents are horrified. And I say, the child's overwhelmed. And they'll go, yes, their cousins were over. Or my daughter with her son was over and trying to play with this toddler. And we were horrified when the toddler bit. But you're right. They were, through an act of trying to be kind, were totally overwhelming the toddler. And so the toddler bit them. And we see that in young dogs. But we're not talking about that either. We're saying, we need to, teach bite inhibition. Don't teach it. Remove the pressure. Dogs that are tense in the body will bite harder, because when you're tense, it changes your ability to grade pressure. And if you think about yoga, hopefully no one at the end of a beautiful, rewarding yoga class goes up to the yoga teacher and slaps them on the back and goes, that was amazing. But equally, on the soccer pitch, people aren't going up to each other and stroking each other going, well done, when they scored a goal. You think the higher the energy, the higher the adrenaline, the higher the body tension, the higher arousal, the harder that social interaction. And that's what dogs are doing. Think of it as a social interaction, but a way of trying to navigate something that's utterly overwhelming for them as well, and a way of navigating pain. What is it? That's where we have to stand back and say, oh my goodness, me trying to engage in a game is what actually started that arousal arc. And we need to redefine play as well, redefine games, because when the stakes are high, the rewards of games can be lost if it now is a win-lose situation. But play is very powerful from a rewarding point of view and building social connections. It's intrinsically rewarding. But again, when we go and look at childhood play, it isn't all rough and tumble and hide and seek, high action, jumping, startled responses, high adrenaline. It's all of those exciting, seeking, high energy engagements, but it's mainly den making, quiet conversations, playing with sand, water, jigsaws, card games. They can be high energy too, but a lot of them can be lower and for a shorter duration. It's reading together. It's, crafting. It's mud pies, den making. There's so many amazing ways of engaging with adults or children in a really peaceful way. And that, again, is something that we might not do so much of. We kind of might use enrichment, but we're not looking at enrichment from the physical point of view and some of the things that people might be offering their dog. And it's not a criticism. I applaud anyone that's thinking of creative ways to give their dogs important outlets that engages the seeking system and enables a dog to be curious. But a lot of those engagements aren't enriching on every level. When you actually watch a repetitive movement pattern, maybe with the left paw, if I see teeth marks on a thing that dispenses toys and wobbles, I see frustration. The dog's biting at it instead of actually learning how to tip it. And that is something we could do as a shared experience together. And that's what I used to do with my young dogs, play the original Nina Otterson wooden games. Brilliant. I didn't want them to be complex, to exhaust my dog or fill time so I could be free to do something else. I wanted to have that as a shared experience with them in the same way that I raised my children. And having these really quiet interactions is strengthening our bond. It's giving us a really lovely way of extending a conversation, having a rewarding engagement where I'm interested in what the dog's interested in, instead of always expecting the dog to be interested in me and what I'm inviting them to do, and extending their ability to learn and come up with contingencies and problem solve, but in a really calm way that doesn't tip them into frustration and high arousal. So if I think hard mouthing, someone says somebody actually did message not that long ago, and they said their mother's sight hound, newly adopted from a shelter. So this could have been a return. In the garden, for no reason, would just suddenly start really grabbing, and they had to leave the dog in the garden. The dog would go whizzing around, and they'd have to wait for the dog to calm down before they could either go back to the outside or invite the dog in the house. And I said, okay, talk me through everything. Is there a game going on before? Because in my experience, if we can help caregiver modify games, modify handling, meet a dog's need to be curious, engage the seeking system through enriching engagements, which is free work at heights that are easy for the dog to access emotionally or physically. That is how free work developed. If we're able to change all that, this mouthing just disappears or diminishes. So what's going on with the game before and handling before? And the person said, you're right, it's always during a game. And I said, okay, in my experience, when dogs actually do want to have a shared game that's a bit more active, it literally lasts seconds between a dog and a human. Often only lasts seconds between dog and dog. Minute maybe at most. It doesn't go on for minutes. And we tend to keep that going. Oh, great. Oh, look, I'm brilliant. And oh, my dog's really enjoying this. And look, we can do this shared exciting game together. But that often tips particularly the adolescent dog into overdrive, because they don't have the ability to self-regulate. They haven't got that ability to recognize when something's starting to move from fun to anxiety and high arousal. Same as children. So I gave them some tips, and I just gave them some tips on changing mindful contact, not assuming when a dog comes over, maybe they're mirroring, it's an invitation for body contact. It's not necessarily an invitation for body contact when our dogs sit or lie next to us. It's mirroring again. In a desire for companionship is not always a desire for body contact. And within 2 or 3 days, I got an email saying, we cannot believe the difference. And I said, watch the pupil. The minute the eye goes black, that's the dog moving into the sympathetic nervous system response. They're not thinking, they're not even aware what they're doing at this stage. We have to say, look, they're actually getting tighter, the ears are getting closer together, the tail's getting tenser. We need to change something. And let them take that breath and reorganize their body and just calm everything down again. And huge success. The mouthing stopped because the caregiver changed their behavior. And that's something else we need to talk about. People say, how are we going to modify or change the behavior in the dog? Forget that.
Yes.
We actually first need to look at how we might need to modify or change our behavior and habits.
That's exactly it. And it's and I have just been having a conversation with a very good friend of mine who has been taking her dog to the dog park and now is seeing a lot of concerning behavior. And so, you know, that's just the dog is the dog is overwhelmed. And
yeah, absolutely.
And it's the expectation, you know, that this person wants their dog to fit into their life, into what they like to do with their dog, and they have a certain expectation of the kind of dog that they want. And I'm like, you gotta reframe. You gotta reframe.
Yeah.
It's not your dog is always going to be your dog, right? They're not going to change. I mean, you can help them, you can do different things, there's things that you can do, but you got to change.
Yeah, it's like saying, I'm going to have a baby because I want a lawyer in the family.
Yeah.
And funneling that child's education down a legal route as early as possible.
Yeah.
You might have given birth to a dancer.
Yeah. Right. I know, exactly.
Or the canine educator of the future. I was born animal crazy. And had I not been brought up around animals and been free to explore connecting with animals, and I'd been shoehorned into a career like accountancy, I'd literally be going mad.
Yes, I know. Well, this is same with me. There's just no way. I lasted one day in retail. One day. And I realized this is not for me.
No.
There were great people. There were really fab people that I worked with that I met on that first day. And I'm like, this is just not me. I have to move.
Yeah, me
I am
too.
not good. I have to move. I cannot sit in front of a computer. Gotta do it. Gotta move. So I'm like that adolescent dog. I'm like,
exactly.
That puppy, I gotta move. I too learn better when I'm moving. And
we all do. The thing is, we all do. There's been studies that show in poor laboratory mice that if they don't move the big muscles in their hind leg, it has a hugely detrimental impact on the nervous system. Huge.
I can understand that.
It takes us back to why are we creating puppies and young dogs at a time where movement is probably more critical than at any other stage of life.
This needs to become mainstream. As I said, this of course, we've got training on social media, we've got training dogs, everybody's training dogs. This is what needs to be mainstream. This is the evolution. This is what every person needs to know that has a dog, needs to know this stuff. And thank you, Sarah, for coming on the podcast and sharing your wisdom. You are wise too, but sharing your wisdom with us. Come to the Dog Behavior Conference. Sarah will be speaking about adolescence and some of the topics, the subjects that she'll be speaking about. It's movement matters, building calm foundations within a framework of ACE free work, ACE mission rescue, supporting adolescent dogs in shelters. Gosh, don't we need that? The power of play and modifying games, minimizing frustration by paying attention to our own behavior, just like we've been talking about, in establishing an ACE contact contract. You don't want to miss this. Register dogbehaviorconference.com. Thank you so much for joining me on the podcast again. What an amazing podcast this has been. I hope that you are all doing well. Take care of yourselves, and I'll see you again.
Thanks for tuning in to Victoria Stilwell's Positively podcast. For Victoria's online dog training courses, more information, and helpful dog training tips, visit Victoria's official website at positively.com. Get connected on Facebook, Instagram, and other social media as Victoria Stilwell, and follow her on Twitter at Victoria S. Learn to become a professional dog trainer with the Victoria Stilwell Academy at vsdogtrainingacademy.com. And be sure to tune in next time as Victoria helps you and your dog live your best life together, positively.